This is Jeff Weiss with Unit 10 from HRT 211, Plant Propagation. This lesson is going to be about grafting and budding. And there's two chapters from the text and there's actually a lot of great videos on YouTube that demonstrate various aspects of these procedures. I hope you'll take time to look them over. Those of you in the CLC class who've already grafted fruit trees, apple trees, so this is going to be review for some of you. Then our discussion question will talk about the advantages of grafting, of which there's many, and it's a very widespread practice for propagating a lot of plants. And then grafting at home is going to be for the students of this class, but not applicable to the CLC students who did grafting in the lab at school. And finally, we do have another lab on March 31st, and what we'll be doing for that lab is also described in this lecture. So here's some key terms and concepts, and we'll get into these during the rest of the video. Learning objectives are to be able to recognize and discuss the uses, advantages, and in some instances the limitations of propagation by grafting, explain and differentiate between the various grafting and budding techniques, and to describe the conditions that will improve the likelihood of those grafts being successful. So a graft is a union of a root system with a shoot system, and there are many different techniques and circumstances in which grafts are used and can help the horticulturalist. The case illustrated is cleft grafts being put onto what appears to be a fruit tree. And as we observed when we visited the orchard and practiced this technique, many different types of scions can be put on the same tree, depending on the needs of the orchardist and what the goals are of the grafts. Budding is a specialized form of grafting using just a very small piece of scion material, a axial bud, and they're obviously both forms of asexual reproduction. In comparison to propagation by seeds, grafting is relatively expensive and labor intensive. However, for high value plants such as fruit trees, nut trees, and in some instances, as we'll see, tomatoes and other crops, grafting is a economical and very effective way of increasing horticultural production and even some ornamental plants. So here's an old chart showing some of the historical techniques for grafting, but in all cases the grafts rely on fusing together an understock, also known as the stock, chosen for its hardiness, and this provides the root system. And then to that is grafted a scion, and scions are the part of the plant that will determine its appearance for ornamentals or food value, and the quality of the fruit and nuts if it is a tree. So the biology of grafting is that the vascular cambium system of the rootstock and scion need to fuse, and that means that the xylem tissue, which is the tissue that carries water and nutrients up the plant to the leaves, and the rest of the plant, and the phloem, which carries the photosynthates and food materials throughout the rest of the plant. Those tissues need to be united and functional in order for the graft union site to persist. Once those connections are established, however, the graft site should persist for the life of the plant. So why graft? Well, basically it's to take advantage of the best of both worlds, or sometimes even the best of multiple worlds. Some grafts involve three levels of tissue. Some involve an inner well, I can't think of the term right now, but involve a third site between the rootstock and the scion. But in any event, there's a number of reasons, and certainly the main goal is for commercial producers to produce a large number of clones or plants carrying the qualities of the desired plant, or in the case of forestry, the qualities of an elite tree that is intended to be propagated. And some examples of the desirable qualities that are intended to be propagated are for dwarfism, or the size of the tree, especially fruit trees. The growth rate can be determined through grafting. The timing of fruit production, transplanting success can be increased through grafting. Certain qualities of pollen or aesthetics, the production of seeds, or importantly, the resistance to disease can be determined by grafting procedures. And finally, we'll talk about rescue grafts in a little bit, but they can be used, this type of grafting procedure can be used to repair injuries to high value plants, especially trees that have been damaged and need to be saved. So some graphic examples, some images of these reasons for grafting. Producing large numbers of plants. You drive many places now around the country, around the world, and you see vast vineyards of grapevines or orchards of trees. Virtually every single one of them has been produced via a grafting, one or more grafting operations. And in recent years, the number of dwarf plants, which are high yield and easy to harvest, have come to the forefront. So many of the apple orchards that stretch on for miles in places in Washington and other locations are loaded with fruit on dwarf trees that just need to be picked manually or via machines that can easily reach all of the fruit and avoid damage from fruit falling onto the ground or being bruised. So this dwarfism, at least in the case of fruit trees, is a trait that derives from the rootstocks. And in our grafting operation, we used a couple of these rootstocks, and you can see the variation between the smallest dwarfs and some of the semi-dwarf trees. And the standard trees, standard-sized trees might get to easily 10 meters. So dwarfism is can be promoted through grafting dwarf rootstocks. However, as we heard when we visited the orchard, the more the tree is dwarfed, the better or the more finicky it is about the soil that it's planted in, and the more likely it is to require staking. So when I chose the rootstocks that we were going to use for our grafts, I chose semi-dwarfs, which are less specific in their soil and staking requirements. Aesthetics. So here's an example of a tree that's been grafted into kind of a bizarre shape, but it'll give you an example of at least somebody's idea of an aesthetic use of grafting. I mentioned rescue grafts and trees that are girdled by damage from animals or from unfortunate collisions with vehicles can be rescued by use of bridge grafts. Here's another photo of a graft, and in this case you can see clearly the graft site, but over time these the scion and the stock unite, the tissues seal, a callus bridge forms, the same as in the cuttings that we made, and once the callus tissue forms, the tissue differentiates or redifferentiates and unites. The chances for success of that graft union are very, very good. So here's another chart with examples of many of the different types of grafts that are available, and we just worked with whip and tongue and cleft grafting in our exercises, but you can see there's many other specialty techniques and ways of getting plant tissues to unite and grow together. So one way of classifying grafts is by whether it's a detached scion or attached scion, and the grafts that we did were detached scions. And again, here's a bridge graft, which is one example of a graft that can be used as a rescue graft to repair a damaged tree. Tube grafts. This is another technique that is now being used in grafting tomato plants, and some of the same advantages of taking the best of the roots and the best of the shoots are also being used in some herbaceous plants, not just confined to woody plants anymore. This slide has some of the tools of the trade, some of which we used, especially out in the orchard, working with Al Westerman. We used the saw to cut the branches for cleft grafts. There's a bundle of scions, the tar dressing to seal wounds, and then various cutting tools used for preparing the scion wood and making the cuts into the rootstock. So not all grafts succeed. What are some of the main issues? Well, probably the biggest issue is non-union of the tissues, where the tissues either are not correctly aligned or they could be incompatible, or for whatever reason the conditions are not correct for those cambium tissues, the phloem and the xylem, to unite and form new connections. Disease can affect the plant prior to the union of the um, scion and rootstock, and those diseases can be fungal, bacterial, or viral. Or the tissues can simply be incompatible. And this little pyramid illustrates the relative compatibility of different plants. Plants of the same variety and species are the most likely to have compatible tissue and successfully graft together. But sometimes plants will sometimes grafting operations will be successful between different species in the same genus, or even different species within the same plant family. But it is important to note that the success will be greater the more closely the plants are related to each other. So another type of grafting that we have talked about, but we're not going to be able to do with success at this time of year, is budding. So budding uses a much smaller piece of tissue, a much smaller amount of scion tissue than grafting does. But it is a very widely used procedure, especially in fruit trees. In many, or maybe even most of the fruit tree grafts done in commercial orchards are done via budding versus grafting that we did. And the two major types of budding procedures are chip budding and tea budding. What types of buds? Well, here's a chart that shows different buds, and I circled the types of buds that are used for grafting operations in red. It's usually the axillary buds, the ones growing along the stem, and the axils that are used, and they're usually used while they're dormant. So the scion wood, the dormant buds are harvested from the scion wood. Oftentimes those buds are scaly, but that's not necessarily the case. And the vegetative buds, the ones that produce leaves rather than the ones that produce fruit, are normally the buds of choice for budding operations. So I already talked about why grafts fail, but so the grafts can fail immediately without any union, or grafted plants can fail out in the field or out in the orchard or vineyard, and they can fail because of the tissue alignment, because they were put in the wrong polarity, or over time they can fail because of environmental factors that do not favor the plants. Either the temperature, moisture, soils are not appropriate for the grafted plant, or diseases get transferred either through the grafting process or through the soils or atmosphere in the planting site. And the result of this is that plant care is definitely required for grafted plants after they're planted out. And there's a certain amount of mystique involved in establishing successful plantings. I give you this quote from The Grapes of Wrath. Probably all of us read this book in high school, but it does have a tribute to the grafters, the people who in California established these orchards and vineyards. So enjoy. These are great men. Hopefully you get involved in more grafting and you can be great men and women yourselves. I found this chart. There's not much publicly available graphics on manipulations of grafted tissues following the procedure. But this chart shows handling of rootstocks and scions for tomato plants before, during, and after the grafting procedure. So the main manipulations, in addition to performing the graft procedure, are in controlling the humidity and the sunlight available in the greenhouse where these grafted tomatoes are grown, grafted, and kept after the graft procedure. So with that, I'm going to close out the content on grafting and budding, but I'm not going to give you the discussion question of choosing a plant and doing some more research. Find a plant that's frequently propagated by grafting or budding, talk about the technique, and explain the advantages of that technique over other propagation methods for that plant, including propagation by seeds. And if you want to go there, there's a I think we talked about this in seed propagation. There's usually a very good advantage of seed propagation over grafting, and you can certainly include a discussion of that in your discussion post if you wish. So the assignment this time is not applicable for CLC students. It's going to be a graft at home operation, but certainly you're welcome to give a try to taking some plant material and seeing if you can create a successful graft operation. Maybe come spring planting season, if you have purchase a couple of different tomato varieties, you can try grafting the rootstock of one tomato onto the scion of another. And then our lab for Unit 10 will be back on March 31st, and we'll be starting to transplant the seedlings of the native plants that we installed for the plant sale. We're going to be doing the air layering that was postponed because the greenhouse was closed 2 labs ago, and we're going to be looking at crop schedules and making up a crop schedule for next year's plant sale. Jonah Tab is going to be showing us the crop schedule that he's made up for his vegetables, and we're going to be creating a simple timeline or Excel spreadsheet showing the steps and the timing involved in getting a plant, one of our native plants, from seed to finished plant ready to be sold at the plant sale. So I'm looking forward to getting together with you then, and in the meantime I hope you have a great spring break, and we'll see you in the lab on March 31st.